Well, good afternoon. It's great to see so many of you over here this afternoon, continuing with the very large audience that we've seen throughout the day. This is a session which is called the Subcontinental Blueprint, Geopolitics and Cultural Diplomacy in South Asia. The fact of the matter is that in as much as we speak about the affinity, the closeness that we enjoy among nations in South Asia, there are profound differences as well. How does one address that? Is it only exclusively through state mechanisms? Is there a tier 2 also that is sometimes very important? Do we overstate the historical or cultural significance, or is that in fact something that binds us very closely? We've got a fantastic panel, Dr. Shashi Tharoor with us, Sumni Mahudas and Dr. Vinay Sahasrabuddhe. I'd like to thank you all once again for being with us. Dr. Sahasrabuddhe, it's stating the obvious that we have enormous historical links, but institutionally sometimes there are problems. For example, SAARC, it's moribund, it's defunct, and it was the big hope of binding all these countries together. Why is it that these institutions, or particularly SAARC, has effectively failed?
Well, it's a matter of elaborate discussion why SAARC is failing. But before I reflect upon the points you have raised, let me also congratulate NDTV and express my sentiments for the people of Nepal, especially when they are in the midst of such a challenging situation. Coming back to the points you have raised, I believe it is required to do away with this coinage as cultural diplomacy. Because when there is culture, diplomacy is not required. Because the cultural relations are stronger than any diplomatic relation for that matter, and this is more true than in the case of any other country than Nepal. And therefore, this is not cultural diplomacy. Your title also suggests that. I would say cultural relations. They are more central to the history of India-Nepal relations, staying together, working together, growing together for that matter. And I would say, perhaps that may answer the question why SAARC fails. It is required, and let me recall what Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar had said, that we need to have some kind of a cultural commonwealth. And I believe perhaps it is required that we revisit the idea of cultural commonwealth. In fact, it comes to my mind that it could be a Ramakrishna-Buddha alliance kind of a thing, because Sri Lanka, Nepal, India, many other countries could be a part of this new formulation, which could be, it's a suggestion, Ramakrishna-Buddha alliance.
Dr. Tharoor, do you agree?
Well, the question you asked initially about SAARC deserves a reply, but since
I'm asking you if you agree with Dr. Sahasrabuddhe.
I'm coming to that, but fair enough.
Well, he has written a book that he is a Hindu and a proud Hindu as well.
Yes,
so
at the same time, I think our subcontinental relationships do involve countries that do not feel part of the Ramakrishna Buddha tradition. And therefore, there is a case to be made for not perhaps embarking on a path that needlessly alienate other neighbors. And for example, we are making very serious efforts now to cultivate Bangladesh. I'm not sure this would be received very well there. And in fact, we have a lot of cultural commonalities with Bangladesh, which I would suggest that we also need to develop. So I would rather take it outside the religious prism. I agree with Vinayji that culture is a binding force. We talked about it this morning. But I think there is a little concern that if we manage to project it in a spirit that sort of we are the center of Indic civilization, which arguably we are, and that therefore everything sort of emerges from that, it places relationships with sovereign equal nations on a very awkward footing. And that's my only difficulty with the formulation that Vinay just suggested. On the first question you began with, I think it's very obvious that SAARC didn't work because Pakistan was obstructive for a very long time. Pakistan took the position that there could be no real normal relations with India until what they wanted, namely the Kashmir dispute and so on, was front and center. We weren't going to play that game, but SAARC's rules of operation required absolute consensus. So essentially every member had a veto. And as a result, after some years of this kind of obstruction, the government of India decided to take the view that there was not going to be any meaningful progress as long as Pakistan had this attitude, and therefore they essentially put the entire organization on the back burner and started focusing on alternatives like BIMSTEC, which excludes Pakistan. Now, I would say that that's a fair response, and that answers one of your questions, but that the argument that Vinayji raised, which is part of a larger panel discussion today, is extremely important as well, that we must accept that culture is a very, very important basis, but that roti beti is not enough for us to assume and take for granted a certain level of response from Nepal. We must show Nepal the respect it deserves as a sovereign equal country, and we must treat it as an independent actor with its own asks and its own wishes as well. So that's the answer I would give, rather than us floating a Ramakrishna Buddha thing, which may or may not appeal. If Nepal had suggested it, it would be a different discussion. For India to suggest it, I believe, would be diplomatically and politically unwise.
No, just simply to do away with the misinterpretation that it may generate, Dr. Tharoor has expressed his reservations, but let me make it very clear. It doesn't posit India as some kind of a big brother at all. We never treat ourselves as big brother in this entire subcontinent as what they describe. We are brothers, and brothers of the same civilizational soil. There is no question of who is big and who is small. We are all equal. We have respected sovereignty of all our neighboring countries beyond doubt. Only point is that Ramakrishna Buddha are not confined to India. The influence of their teachings, whether it is Bhagavad Gita or Ramayana and Mahabharata, moves across, even Buddha for that matter. Even a country like Afghanistan, where Bamiyan
Buddhas, you go to Thailand as well, but you'll be skipping over
and why should India be looked at as the central to Lumbini is here in Nepal?
No, but that's stating the obvious, and there's no doubt about what you're saying, but in a subcontinent which is divided sharply on religious grounds, if you look at nations which are not Hindu majority or Buddhist majority and are Muslim majority, that construct would be a problem. I think that's the point that was raised.
But if the countries, including our neighboring countries, go beyond the traditional way of looking at belief systems, I think they should join this kind of an alliance. Where is the quarrel?
Okay. Sumnima is waiting very patiently, and we have to keep her involved in this. I just wanted to, the word brother has been thrown about quite a few times in this conversation, in different, sort of constructs, I mean, they are all our brothers, etc., etc. But a concern in Nepal has been that India has been this big brother. Is that changing? Is there not, for example, recognition of a very young government now, where that big brother adage simply doesn't work?
First of all, I'd really want to take a moment to express my condolences to the victims and families of who have been affected by the devastating floods yesterday. Nature has this uncanny way of putting everything into perspective, right? We worry so much about development, we worry so much about infrastructure, geopolitics, but in a matter of seconds, Mother Nature catches us all off guard and shows us how interconnected and interdependent we really are. I mean, an ice avalanche in China breaks off, affects a river downstream in Nepal that now flows down all the way down to India as well. It's very humbling indeed, and I'm sorry, we've all been a little bit distracted by the affairs
No, as we are all, absolutely.
But in terms of, I much liked the fact that you said that India is not a big brother, and for the rest of South Asia, you see everyone as equal. That's very welcomed by us, because as you know, we have a Gen Z government, a very young government, a very young prime minister, and that's really answerable to the people of Nepal, which is also very young. And the people of Nepal now have more confidence, I would say, in the nature of our sovereignty. And they don't want to be forced to pick sides all the time. They don't want to be, it'd be nice if we could have our own strategic autonomy and decide for ourselves what we want to do on major international decisions. But having said that, we respect our two large neighbors very much, and and that's always been the case. So, but I'm glad to hear that you addressed that. Thank you.
If I may just for 1 second, because this is a separate panel, and I'm the only one who seems not to care about, and it's not true. I did want to say that I did, in our earlier panel, begin by expressing my profound condolences. I think the others have done so today for the first time on stage. I've done so earlier. And I'm very pleased to say that I gather that some of the search and rescue efforts have, for example, found 20 missing Indians. We certainly hope and pray that the Nepalese victims' numbers will not be as dramatic as some reports are suggesting. And we obviously extend our solidarity, our concern, and our support for the efforts that are going on to find as many people as possible. And we all share that. Sunima is my counterpart in Nepal as the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee here. And I do want to say, and I'm pleased to acknowledge my senior member, Ravi Shankar Prasadji, is in the audience from the other side politically in the Foreign Affairs Committee. So this is a united position we all have, that it is our duty to extend every support and solidarity to Nepal at this very challenging time.
Vinayji, that said, again, two words which came up in this discussion, sovereignty, and I think the word autonomy also came up. And I think we need to reflect on the dragon in the room, as it were. We cannot have sovereignty or autonomy if you've got a neighbor which salami slices away at our boundaries, despite the fact that they are economically very important to us. There's no taking away. And why India? Why not Bhutan, where several territories in Bhutan, which we very close to us, have been sort of salami sliced by China? How does one deal or accept, if at all, if that word can be used, this reality?
Well, I think, as they say, familiarity breeds contempt. And between most of our neighboring countries, especially Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and even Bhutan for that matter, we should move beyond this familiarity, because that familiarity at times is at a very superficial level. And media, academia, they play their own part in interpreting or misinterpreting things. And therefore, I would suggest that there has to be some kind of a Nepal study centers in India and India study center. Well, I know they are there here. ICCR also has been supporting such centers, but they need to be in big number, because the upcoming generation requires to look at the relations in multiple angles, with multiple dimensions of it, including the developmental dimension which is required.
No, but specific to China, sir, I was asking about China and the fact that it pegs away at the autonomy of countries across the region. And we can add it on to the South China Seas, we won't go there. But is that not a concern collectively for countries across this region?
Well, it has been a concern, and many countries, including India, have voiced these concerns. But then that is the point I'm trying to make, that many a times, even China for that matter, we believe that we know everything about China, but fairly, if we analyze it, we know precious little about China. And therefore, we need to be very watchful. We need to be having that enlightened understanding about all our neighbors, China included for that matter, and then only the upcoming generation would be more alert to the designs of some of our neighbors.
Dr. Tharoor, your thoughts on China?
No, I think it is a very serious concern, and something that I don't disagree at all with Vinayji, that in fact there is a lot of ignorance about each other, that we don't have Indian journalists and Chinese journalists in any significant number in each other's countries. We don't have academic study centers of any number or any substance of great importance that are consciously aware of what's going on, and sort of superficial knowledge, as Vinay rightly said, is not going to be enough. But having said that, we have an objective reality we're living with. We're living with a country which has repeatedly probed across the ceasefire line, which has shown very little inclination to move towards a regular settlement, which has in fact tried to push away the issue by saying that future generations can settle it. But while waiting for those future generations, the present leadership appears to be attempting to change the reality on the ground. The various villages they built up on what they claim is their side of the border, the infrastructure that they have built up is significant. The Doklam incident was followed by the Chinese building a different road in a different part of disputed Bhutanese territory in order precisely to overlook the chicken's neck that connects mainland India with the northeast. And all of this these are not the actions of a friendly power. Equally, we've had them withholding rare earth mineral exports, withholding important power stations, important tunnel boring machines, and now denying visas rather arbitrarily. I've had calls from very senior influential businessmen or major importers from China saying their visas have been denied. Now, this is a suggestion that, to be very honest, we Indians cannot afford to ignore. I mean, it is true that our business community has developed a certain dependence on imports, cheaper imports from China. But that is merely enhancing our vulnerability. China is getting more and more of a leverage, and we have no counter leverage to offer. The trade deficit to China is almost $200 billion now. We're not in a situation where this can be considered healthy. So you're quite right in saying this infringes on our sovereign autonomy and freedoms. But to the credit of the government, they are trying to diversify. We've now concluded a lot of free trade agreements with other partners. We are trying to explore closer relationships with, for example, Europe, which is got its own challenges with both America and China. We are trying in many ways to repair fences in the neighborhood, certainly with Sri Lanka, with Nepal, with Bangladesh. We are trying to improve our relationships. We certainly don't want to be a sort of a subject of Chinese actions. So I will say very frankly, there is a value in a good, equal, mutually respectful relationship with China. But there is no value to me as an Indian in an unequal relationship with a dependence and a vulnerability on one side against the other, and the other one periodically using its leverage to squeeze us and show us who's boss. That is not going to be acceptable to any self-respecting Indian.
Subnima, does Nepal have concerns about your growing, I wouldn't use the word proximity, but working with Beijing a lot more, certainly economically, than Nepal has done in the past, the growing economic presence of China and projects in Nepal? You obviously share a boundary as well. Are there any of these concerns which have been expressed in this country vis-a-vis your equation with Nepal?
I think our geography is one of our most exciting opportunities, really, and that's how we see it. Both India and China growing so quickly, and us being right in the middle of all of this is a very exciting opportunity. And as this political party our party has always said, we would like to play the role of a vibrant bridge between India and China. And I think our relations with both, it's different, right? With India, it's very instinctual. It's so natural. It goes back thousands of years, and with China too. I mean, if you go back again 2,500 years ago, Nepal, Kathmandu Valley was a trading hub connecting along the Silk Road, connecting China to traders in Kathmandu Valley all the way down to India as well. So we've always managed, or in the past at least, played a very significant role in that, and I think we, as this government, sees this as a great opportunity.
Vinayji, we've seen this Gen Z revolution. I've asked this question to others. I haven't asked it to you in this country. We've seen Gen Z active in India. We've seen young people active in Bangladesh. How do you assess Gen Z as a political force, or is it just a movement without necessarily being political?
There is a larger context to this, and which is about democracy. I'm a student of democracy, and I believe people who believe in democracy require to think about as to how we can make democracy deliver. Wherever democracy fails in delivering, these kinds of things are bound to happen on the one hand. On the other hand, if we take the Indian scenario, I think there is nothing so very, special about this agitation recently, because India has, after a few years, time zone, always seen this. We fought against emergency, where the youths of that time, they were not called a Gen Z, were not they at the forefront of the struggle against emergency, the draconian rule? Then there was the mass public movement for Ram Temple in Ayodhya. It was the youth-centric movement, Assam movement, youth-centric movement. So what is so special about Gen Z? Indian youths are a live wire kind of community, and they keep on voicing, and the governments of the day keep on responding to their demands as well. So it is as simple as that. Let us not put it in a different bracket, I would urge.
Gen Z is one half word and one letter. young people have always led movements, I think is the point. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think actually Vinay is quite right that young people have been in the forefront of many agitations.
So there's nothing new over here.
There's nothing new. But at the same time, the curious thing about the Gen Z phenomenon is, first of all, that it happened at this particular time when, as we discussed in the morning, you have similar phenomena in a 15-year span across 6 South Asian countries, which to my mind is a factor worth paying attention to. There wasn't an equivalent in any of the earlier examples that he gave. And the second thing is that at the same time, what we are seeing about Gen Z now is that it's coming up against a very securely entrenched and dominant government that had been widely assumed to be invincible to this sort of pressure. And clearly it wasn't, because it did surrender, it did make its minister resign. There is in a sense, this has been a proving ground for the receptivity and responsiveness of Indian democracy to this kind of protest movement. So Vinayji is right with his historical examples, but this one has something special about it in our time. Of course, it's only been a few months we've been talking about this, and the entire thing could still fizzle out. But there's something that suggests to me it's not going to fizzle out in a hurry, and that indeed there has been a sort of qualitative difference, not just a difference of degree, but a difference of kind in the nature of the democratic protests in our country. Certainly in the context of the last dozen years of BJP rule, this is a phenomenon they have not faced before.
Vinayji, I just wanted to come back to a point you mentioned earlier on when you spoke about a cultural construct, perhaps a cultural commonwealth is the word that you used. I actually agree with you in the context of Nepal. If we take a look at 2015, where the RSS did incredible work in Nepal in the wake of the earthquake. As journalists, whenever we felt hungry, the first place we went to was to the closest RSS camp. And they fed everybody. And they looked after as many people as was humanly possible. Therefore, in the context of Nepal, other than, say, government mechanisms, do cultural associations or institutions like the RSS have a serious play in statecraft?
Statecraft, I wonder, because that is a different zone altogether. But yes, the society over here and RSS may not be under the same banner, maybe it is Hindu Swayam, whatever it is. They are working wherever they are for the local people over there, for the society over there, during natural calamities, for rehabilitation and several such things. So it is very natural for the Sangha Swayamsevaks to come forward and to work for the society of which they are a part. And therefore but I would again say that let us not look at cultural relations from a very narrow and skewed approach. Cultural relations should also take into consideration some kind of an exchange between artisans. Why should it not be? We have a rich artisan culture. There is a tradition both in Nepal and in India as well. So we can work in that context. Languages, for example. Many neighborhood languages, unfortunately, in India are not being taught properly. Nepali is an exception because it is a part of our constitutionally recognized languages. But what about Sinhali language? What about Burmese language? What about Bhoti language? Uzbek or maybe Bhasa Indonesia? We need to work going extra mile on these issues so that there is a kind of alliance of all these neighborhood languages also. Unless and until we do that, I think it would not be easy to understand the neighboring countries and what all is happening in those countries.
Yep. Subnima, if I was to ask you for 2 or 3 things that you would want India to do more of, to improve the equation, to build on the relationship between Nepal and India, what would those be?
I think the narrative has to shift to a certain degree. For example, right now, the fact that the Prime Minister of Nepal has not visited India yet. There was a time when as soon as the Prime Minister is appointed, the first thing he would do is meet an Indian ambassador. And that sort of engagement was never sustainable and never correct. And the fact that he hasn't, it took him a while to meet the ambassador, and now he will be visiting India soon. But the fact that he didn't do it right away, it's being perceived in a certain way in the Indian media. And And I don't think you should read so much into all of that, because the Prime Minister has always said that, he wants to focus on domestic issues first and foremost. Having said that, diplomacy besides what happens behind closed doors is really about symbolism. It's about improving or maintaining ties, personal trust, and so I think the Prime Minister's visit would go a long way. So that's one thing, really with changing the narrative. Well, actually, that would be the main, really. That would sort of resolve a lot of the long-standing issues we have.
Yeah, I mean, I of course agree with what Sunima had to say. As you remember, the Foreign Minister this morning indicated that as far as he was aware, there were plans to have an exchange of visits at the Prime Ministerial level in the course of the year, and let's hope that he turns out to be right. But he also indicated it was premature to talk in practical, concrete terms. But these exchanges and so on are important. Sunima was also being diplomatic and not articulating an ask other than that we should change the narrative, which we, I think, all agree on. But I would say one thing more, which is that what we have seen in the sort of the body language, as it were, between the two governments has, I think, been rather encouraging. There is clearly a respect for each other's decision-making, a respect for each other's right to do things in their own way, at their own pace. I don't think that India has expressed any public discontent or dissatisfaction with the fact that the Prime Minister has not come, or that it took him a while to receive the Indian ambassador, which he finally did quite recently. And I would say that that's, to my mind, the right thing to do. Let Nepal proceed according to what it considers its priorities and its ways of going. And we, in turn, will show Nepal the appropriate. If Nepal says, we'd like you to come soon or whatever, I'm sure our Prime Minister will oblige. And I think we should just leave it as not an issue that needs to be blown out of proportion.
So let me blow it out of proportion.
Thank you.
Let
You
me
have to do that as a journalist.
So, Vinayji, the other way of looking at what Dr. Tharoor is saying is that it's not just the Nepali Prime Minister who hasn't come to our country as yet. It's even the Bangladeshi Prime Minister who hasn't. And therefore, are there signals being sent that, don't assume that a relationship in the past is going to be the same as it is now?
I think many times journalists read between the lines. They don't read the lines. So read the lines. Nothing like unnecessarily reading between the lines. They may have their own reasons, but we have already laid a red carpet for all our heads of neighboring states, and I'm sure today or tomorrow they would definitely visit India, and the relations could be taken to a different level, beyond doubt.
All right, look, I'd like to thank all three of you very much for being with us. By all means, sir.
One small point, just I'm tempted to make it because I believe external affairs in countries like India are definitely monitored at the central level, which is good. But the states also can play a role. For example, I come from Maharashtra, and everybody knows about Tulsa Bhavani, which is a temple created by Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. And Tulsa Bhavani has its own connection with Nepal. Degu Taleju is the deity over here, and the idol that was created in Tulsa Bhavani temple is of the stone which was brought from Nepal. Likewise, many states, including Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand of course, and Bihar, West Bengal, all these states, many more also could be, have a very vibrant historic relation, ancient relation with Nepal. And we need to build upon that. We should encourage our states to cultivate these relations further and take them to a different level, because as I said, the foundational aspect of India-Nepal relations is people-to-people relations, cultural relations.
No, I couldn't agree more. I'd like to thank all of you for being with us. Geopolitics doesn't necessarily need to be sort of some high-level positioning of governments. It actually stems from the people, from our past, and perhaps the role of states needs to be looked at as well. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.